Good afternoon, and thank you for standing by. I'd like to inform all participants that your lines have been placed on a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's call. Today's call is also being recorded. If anyone has any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to Mr. Daniel Giovina. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you, Erica. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar titled E-commerce Channel Mix, the third and final session of a three-part webinar series on digital strategy. My name is Dan Giovina. I am your host for today. I am a Senior International Trade Specialist at the U.S. Department of Commerce, U.S. Commercial Service in San Francisco, California. Today's presentation is being brought to you by my colleagues who are also on the call, Ms. Cynthia Torres and James Bledsoe, both from the U.S. Commercial Services E-commerce Innovation Lab, along with Bernadette Rojas, Senior International Trade Specialist at the U.S. Commercial Service in Fresno, California. The lab is an office within the U.S. Commercial Service which focuses on advancing the expertise and knowledge of cross-border e-commerce and digital strategy among all U.S. small and medium-sized businesses. Now, a couple of items before we get started. Be sure you are connected to both your telephone and online WebEx platform to view the presentation. All telephone lines are muted for the entirety of today's webinar. The recording and PowerPoint slides will be sent to all participants no later than Monday. We will have a Q&A session at the conclusion of this presentation, so please type your questions in the chat box at any time throughout this presentation. If there is not enough time to address your question, we will gather all your questions, populate the answers, and send them along with the presentation on Monday. If you experience any technical difficulties during our presentation today, please press *0 at any time for assistance. I'd like to take a moment to inform those who are new to the U.S. Commercial Service about our role at our agency. We are the trade and investment arm of the United States federal government, a division of the International Trade Administration under the U.S. Department of Commerce. Our mission is to promote U.S. exports, protect U.S. interests abroad, and facilitate foreign direct investment into the U.S. With more than 1,300 employees assisting U.S. exporters in selling their products and services, we have offices all over the world. Domestically, we have over 100 offices, and internationally, we have 115 in 75 countries located at U.S. embassies and consulates. Now, I'd like to introduce our dynamic featured speaker. I am honored and privileged to introduce John Brownderhorst, Senior Strategist at BTrax Inc. John has spent the last 15 years helping clients expand into Asian markets with a focus on understanding how value propositions can change from one market to another. In 2006, after returning from 5 years working in Japan, John began consulting for Japanese government agencies on their foreign direct investment initiatives. In doing so, he connected over 100 companies with partners and customers in Japan. Some of his work has included consulting for NTT on business development strategies and helping Sony's spin-out motion portrait on U.S. market entry strategies. John is currently working on business development, strategy, and marketing initiatives with BTrax, Momenta, Global Sake, and Presidio Sports Management. At this time, please help me to welcome John. John, you may begin.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Do I currently have the ball? Yes, all right, Here we go. First of all, it's a pleasure to be speaking about selling online globally as part of this three-part series. Thank you to the U.S. Commercial Service for having me as a speaker, and Daniel for that wonderful introduction. I'm excited today to talk about the various factors that you consider when expanding your online sales to new markets. The focus of the conversations will be on market opportunities, considerations that aren't necessarily tied to COVID's effect on consumer behavior. So the data you'll see today will mostly be pre-COVID, just to keep that in mind. I can tell you though that interest in global expansion has grown for companies that were considering other markets, especially with Asia opening up already, along with changes in consumer behavior around shopping. Something to consider. I recently found a quote by Chief Research Officer at Global Web Index, Jason Mander, who said, "E-commerce stands out as one of the activities that increased during COVID and not only created new converts, but is also most likely to sustain these higher activity rates post-COVID-19. The trend is more pronounced in APAC compared to the rest of the world, and we can expect to not only see growth from pre-existing users, but significant growth coming from new converts as well." So hopefully today's talk will provide some insights into driving discovery, building an authentic and trusted brand, reaching customers with that end goal of making sales. As James Bledsoe mentioned in the first webinar of this series about overcoming digital roadblocks, if you can't be found, you can't make a sale. And so I'll be kind of discussing some of those aspects to help you get found. I'm also glad that Hannah, in the second webinar, covered e-commerce with a focus on and expertise on EU, because honestly, most of my experience has been from US to Asia and vice versa. So there may be some repetition in what I covered. So if you've listened to the first two webinars, basically see that as the importance of doing those things when going international. It's also because there's an overlap in topics that I'll cover, in strategies and best practices may be the same, whether selling B2B, B2C, or even geography agnostic. So some things to consider that we'll be going over today are cultural diversity, the need to sell in multiple currencies and language, understanding payment preferences, and things like that. I will not be covering tax laws and government regulations. Thank goodness that was covered in the previous webinar. So today, what I really ask is that you have a mindset where you understand that you will need to customize your product or service to meet local customers' tastes. So I can't emphasize that enough. Remember, there are cultural, economic specifics of a new market that are necessary to getting consumers to shop more frequently and spend more. So the value propositions for why customers shop online may differ from one market to the next, and knowing that will make it easier for you to create messaging to promote your product or services. So credibility is key. All right, I'll jump right in. This slide is just there. If you want to connect with me, you can point your camera at your phone camera at that QR code, and pop LinkedIn will show up. The reason I'm talking today is B-Trax. I work with them on helping companies expand to the Japanese market through digital marketing strategies, through understanding how companies can create messaging and create strategies for connecting to a different type of audience, whether it's different demographic or different psychographics. Also, Global Sake is a community/event that I've co-founded 3 years ago that is focused on helping people with going international from the product perspective. So we have these kinds of thought leadership and these conversations around a lot of the questions that you may have. Momenta is a company that I've been working with where we mostly work with large CPG companies, CPG brands, who are wanting to sell into new markets through marketplaces to take care of the gray market, to address different consumer shopping habits. So whether it's a company like Gerber who is expanding to Japan and has a Nestle shop but also wants to sell on Amazon or Rakuten, we're working with them on the infrastructure and the different kind of service providers that they would need to work with. And then Presidio Sports Management, that's more focused on the fitness space. So I will move forward as you know enough about me. Today, the focus is on choosing the right e-commerce sales channel mix. Depends upon understanding the online purchasing habits in your target market. So the objective today is to find new foreign buyers through an e-commerce channel mix. So the things you'll learn, hopefully, by the end of this will be establishing a baseline for where your traffic comes from, knowing who your customers are and from where they are buying, choosing an appropriate mix, the sales channel mix, and then keyword translation considerations for overseas search engines. And as I said before, some of what I will be talking about you have heard from previous webinars. whether it was focused on B2B, and it's still very applicable for B2C online selling. I'd love to kind of just quickly go over the landscape of what global B2C e-commerce looks like. Global B2C e-commerce sales, they're expected to reach $4.5 trillion by 2021. And a recent Google study showed that global shoppers were shopping at least once a week. 81% of global shoppers were shopping in the past week. So we know that fashion and electronics may be kind of the perennial leading categories for cross-border e-commerce, but there's tremendous opportunity in a number of underserved categories, including beauty, cosmetics, pet care, food, beverage, sporting goods. And while this may be the case for this audience, I'm not sure, but if you're not selling internationally yet, that's okay. Fewer than 1% of the 30 million companies based in the U.S. export their products or services to other countries, which is a lower percentage than most other developed countries. But according to the International Trade Administration, the majority of U.S. companies that do export are doing so to only one country. So usage, perceptions, penetration levels, growth rates are far from homogeneous across the world. And while we're looking at an increasingly competitive landscape, make sure to understand the consumer, understanding the regional consumer sentiment are keys to staying ahead of some of these trends. All right, next slide, here we go. The top e-commerce countries, you may already know this. China's at the top, US is second, and then rounding out, we're looking at the UK, Japan, and depending on the data that you look at, it's either Germany or South Korea. Basically, the top online marketplaces in the world sold just over $2 trillion in 2019, and these are sites like Alibaba, Amazon, eBay, and others, which accounted for 58% of that number. So if we start breaking it down, if you start doing research into the top marketplaces, you'll probably be looking at it from two different aspects. One would be the GMV, the gross merchandise value, i.e. the total value of goods sold on the marketplace, or potentially some data you'll see is more on website visits. I would say that GMV is a better number to look at, as website visits doesn't necessarily translate into sales. So let's get into some of these. Where does your traffic come from? Establishing that baseline. This is actually a slide that I found super interesting, so I'm sharing this one point right here to let you know that online shoppers are increasingly looking outside of their country's borders for purchases. So recently, there was an evaluation over a 6-month period to see if oversized purchases were the majority, and that was the case in all but one continent, North America. So if you're looking to test out markets from your home country, i.e. the U.S., you can run ads or campaigns in other markets via geo-targeting. But please make sure you have properly localized that content. Also, take into consideration what the value proposition is for your product or service, and don't just use the same ad content necessarily. So things to consider. Are you getting sales from a market you are not actually actively in? Have you received interest from distributors or partners? Some of the ways to kind of see that is to understand whether or not you're using global without trying is using things like tools like Google Trends, Google Search Console, Google Analytics to pull data. So basically analyzing, are you already getting traffic from other locations? And this is an easy way to understand where you should be going. And to be clear, while this slide is about using Google Analytics, you will need to do research on how to create messaging to convert traffic once you decide you're going to go after certain countries. And I'm not also talking only about Google Analytics. Some fun examples would be for Evernote when they expanded to the Japanese market. When listening to the founder, he spoke about how he received a Twitter message via from NTT Docomo about investment. And that was kind of one of the main signals to help him understand that that was the potential next country to go to. So if you're getting investment, if you're getting sales, And obviously, you're not going to necessarily have to worry about all of these markets at once because I don't think from a resource perspective that's a great use. But if you're not aware of how to do this, I would say Google it. You can do Google Analytics locations reports and see which countries what segments are showing interest. All right. Next, traffic sources. So this is an interesting slide because it's probably you'll probably have seen this in your experience with the U.S., but as you can see, direct and search are the sources that a lot of brands are getting kind of interest from. And so whether growing your international presence or growing your domestic presence, you need to make sure you're investing in better content marketing efforts. It's worth it for many e-commerce stores, and if done well, it can attract quality links, boost SEO. But relying on too much on one source of traffic can leave you exposed to risks also. So just because it's fantastic for generating traffic today doesn't mean it will continue to be. And according to a 2019 study, search traffic generated 65%, as you can see, or in this case, 74, sorry. And so you have to really consider like direct-to-site, email, SEO are leading traffic drivers. Next, social media, something that we can't really discount, even though, as you saw on the previous slide, that most traffic comes through direct or search. People are using social media to discover and research and to showcase, to see if a brand is credible. As you can see, 43% of global shoppers research products online via social networks. With the introduction of more social commerce tools like checkout on Instagram, this industry has seen growth in the power of social media as in users' purchasing awareness and decisions. If you are looking to go international, please understand, though, that not every social media that you're currently on will be relevant in the new market that you're going after. It can be a rabbit hole, as creating social media channels and content for every market is tedious, especially when you think of also managing it. But if you're serious about specific markets and you understand how purchase decisions are made, you'll want to put some focus in. Obviously, if you're wanting to grow your business in Japan, you need to think about where your target demographic is. I'll go more into details on that, but just understand that there are some great opportunities to connect with consumers and have conversations through social media. All right. As I said before, Japan is an area that I have a lot of background in. I've worked with companies expanding there and also vice versa. So I understand the mindset of working with a Japanese consumer business. And as you can see, this slide shows that more people, I think it would be interesting, I should have looked up previously compared to this, is how many people have bought products through social media posts. And more and more people have said that they purchased, in this case, 63%. And, you know, in Japan, what we're seeing is Line, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, but really, I would say Instagram is very popular. Line, if you're really serious about Japan, is something to consider. Twitter and Facebook, the use cases are a little different than what we would expect in the U.S., and there's plenty of content on what to kind of what social media to look at in Japan. And I saw Q&A or chat come through, but I guess we'll address them at the end of this. So I'll make sure to kind of look over those questions at the end. And also, you know, other areas that people may be coming through, when you are expanding to other markets, realizing that the mobile share of e-commerce is only growing. If you're going to Asia, you have to realize that much of the people's use with sales is mobile first. So if you have not, if you don't have an experience that's optimized for mobile, you're missing out. That that can be true whether you're selling via your own website or have a landing page for people who want to just know more about your company or product. You know, maybe they found you on a marketplace, but they want to research a little bit more before committing to buying your product. And you know, as you can see, I didn't include it here, but in terms of the traffic being 65% mobile and then sales being 53%, I would be interested to also research a little bit more on how that's skewed versus travel-related purchases, because travel, typically, you may do the research on mobile, but when you actually do the purchase, most likely it's going to be on the desktop. So I think, you know, that basically is another way of saying that mobile is even more important if you take out the travel sector. All right, mobile commerce in Japan. Almost 40% of online shopping, and this was in 2018, was done via smartphone. So, you know, in 2020, that's a $37 billion market that you could be missing out on if you don't have an experience optimized for mobile in Japan specifically. Another thing to consider is you may know that Japan is an aging and shrinking population, but don't discount the aging population, right? 30% in 2019, 30% of 60-plus-year-olds use smartphones to shop online, with 70% of Japanese people older than 60 years owning a smartphone. So they are a tech-friendly, mobile-first market to address if you're serious about going after the Japanese market. All right, knowing your customers. So we've talked a little bit about that. I shared a little bit about what the Japanese specifically, but when we talk about understanding your target customers, you can obviously skim online for quick answers to questions, but understanding the motivation behind consumer behavior takes more than just Googling. So if you want your target customers to love your products, the value you offer must meet customers' needs. So understanding that if you're selling into a predominantly collectivist culture, that can dampen enthusiasm for trying out untested products or shopping in non-traditional ways. Also, understand that when they shop, actually, as Tawny from Zonote spoke in the last webinar, not everybody is shopping on Cyber Monday or Black Friday. So if your strategy is to take full advantage of those shopping days, you may be missing out on bigger opportunities. So, you know, she talked about the research when big shopping days are happening, such as Singles Day that started out in China. Or I'll talk a little bit more about this too. It's Rakuten, a Japanese marketplace, have their own sales that they recommend their merchants taking advantage of. So focusing on things like UX factors like easy navigation on mobile, clear product images and copies, simplified checkout to help attract and convert these different mobile visitors that you would have. So I'll also be talking about localizing content right here, but I'd like to also emphasize that you need to potentially adjust your product or your focus of what products you're offering, as they may be different into new markets. I recently was on another webinar where a U.S. Company selling supplements, while they didn't change their products themselves, they realized that in Japan, for instance, their most popular products in the U.S. were not the most popular in Japan. In the U.S., people are buying more in bulk. In Japan, they were smaller packaged products. And if you can understand that Japanese typically are not buying things in bulk. Like if you understand the shopping habits of Japanese. Also, the other thing to consider is understanding any type of regulations that a supplement company may have in terms of doing drop ship from the U.S. Another example would be if you are a bed-in-a-box company. I worked with one based out of Australia that was entering the Japanese market for a variety of reasons. Well, they weren't going to just be selling the mattresses in the same size as what they were selling in the Australian market. So they did the research to understand what a typical Japanese bed size is, but also how to even connect with customers on a new type of product that they maybe weren't aware of. They're aware of beds, but they weren't aware of bed in a box. And you have to take all these other considerations around returns and customer service and things. And so we'll go into a little bit more detail. As you can see here, if you are going into a new market, those consumers want to buy products in their native language. They rarely or never buy from English-only sites, and they prefer navigation and content in their language. I would even say that these numbers are even higher for many Asian markets, specifically Japan, and from my experience, because the Japanese are not really kind of searching for content in English. Another kind of know your customer point of view is, why are consumers shopping online? So according to American Economic Review research, shopping online is less expensive or the same price as purchasing a product at a brick and mortar store in most countries. Japan has that highest percentage compared to other countries such as Brazil, US, and Germany. But keep that in mind when you're pricing your product, when you're thinking about, and also this, this depends on the product category. But these are things you have to consider, especially when you're thinking about how much it costs to potentially ship a product if you're doing drop shipping, or even, what expenses would be incurred if you're doing FBA, Amazon FBA, and you have to get the product into Japan. All right, payments. Make sure that when, and one of the things to consider when payments, and this is something that I've noticed, is marketplaces, other e-commerce providers, they are making it easier for you to offer sales in the new market currency, local currency. But don't skip out on this. Don't think that just because the dollar is well known, people are going to pay for something when they see the dollar. So it's really not that hard, knowing that 92% of people would prefer to shop and make purchases on-site that prices in their local currency. We talked about cart abandonment before in the previous webinars, and 33% are likely to abandon a purchase if pricing is in U.S. Only. And speaking of that, when we're talking about payments in the U.S., you're most likely majority of your sales are being paid for using credit or debit cards. Please understand that that is not necessarily the case in the rest of the world. So not every country is going to shop with a credit card. The good thing is when you're selling via Amazon, they are, like if I'm selling via Amazon in Japan, I'm able to take advantage of some of these other payment platforms. So that will increase conversion instead of just offering credit cards. And while there is, actually I'll jump right to the next slide, while there is a move for a lot of countries to be switching to cashless payments, as you can see here, Japan is at the bottom, with only roughly 20% of purchases being cashless payment methods. The Japanese government is doing a big push, especially when it was leading up to the Olympics. They were doing a big push for offering incentives for merchants to start offering, doing more with cashless. But cashless payments here are defined as expenditures that don't involve the use of physical cash. If you're going to Korea, it's almost the opposite. Why would you potentially be losing customers? So this was interesting in the sense that the last webinar also discussed this, but a January 2019 survey showed that online shoppers worldwide revealed that 41% of shoppers had abandoned a digital shopping cart when the cost of delivery turned out to be higher than anticipated, making it the most common reason for doing so. This actually was brought up this week when I tried buying something and sending it to, in this case, I was trying to send it to Japan, and the cost to ship was doubled the price of the product. So luckily for me, I was able to look on Amazon JP and find the same product, which was shipped for a fraction of the price. The last webinar discussed why shoppers not only abandon carts but also merchants. There was some really great insight from the perspective of shoppers avoiding retailers because of lack of transparency on duties and brokerage fees, or things like no delivery date being provided. In these cases, I'd recommend looking into the target country's big shipping companies, as many of them have a presence in the U.S. So I say this because I'm aware that of Yamato, which is one of Japan's largest shipping companies. They have multiple offices in the U.S. They will provide insight onto what regulations, extra costs you will incur or you'll need to pass on to the consumer, so you know beforehand. So, all these kinds of research, I would highly recommend looking into which partners could help you understand the costs associated with entering that specific market. This conversation can get into the weeds as we talk about answers being different, depending on the materials, ingredients, size, specific product categories. But there are options out there that you can find these answers, and it'll save you a lot of headache when you do try and send. Sales channels. So I'm guessing many of you are looking to sell via marketplaces, whether it's Amazon, Lazada, into these different markets, and I'll be going a little bit more into marketplace versus e-commerce versus other channels, but there's a trend in e-commerce where retailers are increasing availability across multiple channels. So instead of selling exclusively through a dedicated brand site, companies will expand their sales channels to include sites such as Amazon, eBay, Facebook, even Pinterest. And so this multi-channel approach, or if they have a brick and mortar, an omni-channel approach, the strategy has become increasingly vital to growing companies. And as we've seen, some of the leading internet companies are capitalizing on the opportunity to be leaders in the commerce world. Regional potential. So the opportunity among several countries with similar characteristics is important when deciding if you're going to offer that localized site that serves multiple countries in a region. Your goods and services may not be all that appealing to an entire region like APAC, so you also should be making sure your analysis includes the country-by-country evaluation. I've had a lot of conversations over the years with clients who come to me and say, I want to enter Asia. And I think that's great, but you can't really have that mindset of Asia being one place. Figure out, doing some of the activities we showed earlier about the trends, about where the analytics, about where you're getting traffic, and then kind of prioritize based off of that. That being said, experiment with marketplaces in target regions where 60% of global on-sites now take place. So one of the simplest ways, you can kind of test out foreign markets is that idea of online advertising, social media, bro. Having that international approach to your various ads through your social media activities, through geographic targeting. Marketplace versus e-commerce. Similarly to what Hannah talked about in the last webinar about online sales in the EU happening on marketplaces versus e-commerce sites, Japan tends to also have more of an online presence via e-commerce sites. In this case, you can see that almost 57% of the total number of stores is on e-commerce sites. That being said, that is not a mutually exclusive kind of relationship. And I included Shopify here, but honestly, Shopify in Japan is a very small player in the e-commerce marketplace kind of landscape. And in the case of the total number of stores for Amazon, we're not talking about total number of products. We're talking about the number of people or companies selling products. So, what are you selling on currently? Things to consider, in the U.S. What is that platform's presence in your target market? Do they have partners? One example would be if you're selling on Shopify and you're interested in the Japanese market, Shopify recently partnered up with Rakuten. So that's one way of trying to kind of enter the market without having to necessarily start all from scratch. In the case of a foreign brand, looking to enter a market, Amazon most likely will be your most accessible platform for selling products in many countries, even including Japan. But it also depends, like, is your strategy going to be that you're going to drop ship from the U.S.? Or will you be looking to warehouse in Japan, or even maybe a closer kind of warehouse location somewhere in China or Hong Kong? The good thing for if you're looking for consumers in other markets and they understand that you're shipping from the U.S., they most likely will understand that it will take longer. So even if a value proposition is usually, if they're used to being, 1 to 2 day delivery, they will understand that if they're ordering something that's coming from California, that it will most likely not be there in 2 days. So while the shift towards a more direct-to-consumer e-commerce model may hurt marketplaces, it actually bodes well for foreign brands selling to, let's say, Japanese customers through their own web stores. Also, thanks to Japanese customers being more accustomed to shopping online, apprehensions about sharing credit card information or addresses have also gone down. Whereas before, consumer trust was limited to the biggest online marketplaces like Rakuten and Amazon, reached a point where now customers feel comfortable purchasing directly from brands as well. When researching marketplaces, realize that some of the consumer habits you may expect may be different depending on the marketplaces. The example earlier around, consumers in a market expecting fast delivery and understanding that it may take longer because of being shipped from the U.S., that's something, that is something you have to just make sure that you have to build that brand loyalty too, because obviously it would be more expensive, it takes more time. And the other interesting thing is while in Japan, people don't necessarily shop on price, I believe there is the expectation that shopping on Amazon will be a cheaper option than maybe buying via a website or something like that. One thing that's I don't think has been brought up as much, and it depends where, what your product is and what the strategy is crowdfunding. I recently was speaking with the COO of Oil Novagym, Graham Ripple, and we kind of discussed, they just launched this Kickstarter, and it's currently 55% international. To be fair, the language when I was looking it up is in English. And that's different from their usual 90-10 or 85-15 U.S. sales. This is their second Kickstarter, so the number of sales has increased because there is some brand awareness already. But even their first Kickstarter was 60-40 U.S. to international backers, and that crowdfunding opportunity gave them some really great insights into what countries would be a good fit. For this latest one, I believe they're the most successful fitness-related Kickstarter, and that I think has to do with the COVID effect. Everyone is now focused or has been focused on indoor workouts. So, if you're a company that is limited in resource and you decide to run a Kickstarter campaign, that's a great way to see which markets are interested in your product. So two great benefits if you can do this well. I mean, it's most likely going to be all in English, so your targets may be a little different, but you'll first of all get interest in understanding where international you should go. Second, that I actually I didn't think about as much was the inbound distributor inquiries. This kind of crowdfunding has helped them find distributor partners as well as seeing which countries had multiple inquiries. One of the things I would say when you are looking at potentially distributors, and it was covered a little bit in the first round, the first webinar, is when you talk to them, ask them what their digital marketing kind of chops are. Because a lot of times when you're talking to distributors, they'll get you awareness in the target country, and I'll use Japan as an example, and they'll be able to get you in some brick and mortar. but what are they doing to help you increase your online presence, your e-commerce sales, and be very clear about what the expectations are. And I only say that because I've been in situations now where a client or a brand is happy with some of the brick and mortar sales, but they're just not seeing the benefits from the online side. All right. International SEO. So this is we're kind of going in a little bit targeted direction here, talking about international SEO, keyword research. How do people search in different markets? So, earlier we discussed understanding if you are already going global, whether through international sales from countries you haven't been targeting or traffic from other locations. Knowing that will help you with your international SEO strategy. I mean, you can start with keywords that are already bringing organic search traffic to your site and kind of complete your keyword list by using tools like Google Keyword Planner, SEMrush, SimilarWeb, or Moz. Make sure, though, keyword translation considerations for overseas search engines. Make sure to connect those dots between what you're selling and how people are searching online for what you have to offer. You can obviously do Google Translate, and I might bring this up again, and I know it was brought up in previous webinars, but I would highly recommend working with native speakers of your target market who are much more familiar with the culture of that country. If you're running ads, make sure to use Google's Keyword Planner so you can understand the most up-to-date keywords that are trending. The keyword research tool market is exploding, and every day a new tool seems to appear. I'll be talking about this tool in the next couple of slides, but I learned about a tool called TwinWord through following content shared by international SEO expert, a guy named Chris Ralph, R-A-U-L-F. I actually have links to him because I'll be honest, I am not the international SEO expert for global per se. I can talk to you about Japan and how to work that, but I also wanted to make sure that I brought in insights around prioritizing your international SEO strategy for more global e-commerce markets. So another thing is if there's not enough organic search volume to target a specific country, maybe targeting that language may be the option, but you can start with countries that speak the same language and use equivalent keywords. But don't get lazy. Just because it's popular keywords in the U.S., make sure that if you're going to the United Kingdom, make sure that those keywords are, being used the same way. You may be wasting money if you're using keywords that just don't convert in other markets, even if English is the language. So one other kind of interesting way to help you with SEO would be obviously using the localized version of the language, the local currencies, payment methods, but you can also use localized URLs for each language version of your site, to raise your rankings. Localized URLs send clear signals to search engines so they can determine the site's location and relevance compared to others in that country. So to only show the correct language version based on the searcher's location, Google suggests using hreflang annotations. And in case you're wondering, hreflang tags, what they are, they're a technical solution for sites that have similar content in multiple languages. So the owner of a multilingual site wants search engines to send people to the content in their own language. So let's say, a user is Japanese and the page that ranks is English, but there's also a Japanese version. You would want Google to show the Japanese page in the search results for that Japanese user. This is the kind of problem that hreflang was designed to solve. All right, I'll quickly run over this, but one of the things sellers will overlook when there are local search engine preferences. The impact of this can be enormous to take time to do some research and adjust your SEO activities accordingly. So understanding that running ads on Google may not always achieve the results you're looking for. If in Russia, Yandex is right up there, while Naver is in Korea, one that you should be targeting. Google Trends. I would say that, when you are using Google Trends, let's say you sell sunscreen, you may be disheartened to kind of look to see, you see, oh, well, is sunscreen a popular term in Japan? And you're going to see this blue line, right? Like, no, not at all. Make sure you look up and you research what are the popular keywords to help you understand which way to go with, whether or not it's even worth your time. But you would be disheartened if you started looking at just at English. Transcreation. I've spoken about transcreation before, and I really love the example that Chris Ralph did in a previous post. And he also runs a lot of free webinars on things. And I don't speak German, so I'll be honest, I'm not going to explain these results. I'm not going to try saying them. But if you were to use DeepL, which is similar to Google Translate, but I found it to be better, more quality. If you're looking up women's running shoes, it says it translates into German as that, and then there's also these other alternatives. But the interesting thing is in the U.S., women's running shoes, there's 60,500 searches performed for that term per month on Google. But if you're looking on these TwinWord results, it doesn't, you're seeing 1,600, 30. That doesn't work as well, right? So make sure that although the keywords that your DeepL or your Google Translate pops out, make sure that they're actually the way that your target market is searching for those words. So in this case, there was a transcreation of another way of saying it that actually resulted in 12,500 searches in Germany. And so I think it's Laufschuhe Damon. So if you had to pick one trans-created keyword for the German market, it wouldn't be any of these actually. And another great way to test that is to double check your keywords. Confirm that the results for those keywords are correct. So the trans-created keyword you can see up there, but really make sure that your pages are optimized for that one keyword, and you can open an incognito window in Google Chrome and then use a website like isearchfrom.com, which will allow you to perform a search as if you're using Google in Germany. And so that'll give you some ideas of what the results are and how you would be competing with the market. So make sure to research what is influential for shoppers when deciding to buy online, whether it's the return policy, the shipping time, the payment options, or the customer reviews. Managing inventory scattered across the globe, or accounting for local taxes, or optimizing for supply chain, or even selecting logistics and fulfillment partners require a lot of careful consideration. And so understanding when different countries have big sales and if the marketplaces you're selling on have specific sales days, really need to think about these things by tapping into marketplaces all over the world, whether you're doing Amazon UK, Lazada in Southeast Asia, Linio in South America, U.S. businesses, you can reach a new global customer base pretty easily without that heavy upfront investment. But just realize that you may need to, it may be in your best interest also to create that landing page, to create that website, so that if somebody in Japan wants to look up your company to get some clarity on whether you're a credible, trustworthy company, whether your products, what people are thinking about your products, that customer experience is key to consider. So if you're selling online globally, if that's really of interest to you, you should be able to find a service provider who's willing to at least have that conversation with you about your goals and provide insights on what you may need to do. So honestly, I would recommend, obviously you're going to want to Google, you're going to want to do some desktop research, but find a service provider who has a presence in your target market There's some great resources on the U.S. Commercial Service site. I'd also recommend looking into your city, state service offerings. I say that because I'm aware of grants and programs that are offered in Denver, Colorado, which is where I'm currently based, or even looking into country-specific programs from your target market. So if you're interested in Japan, there's an organization called the Japan External Trade Organization. It's similar to U.S. Commercial Service that will help you understand some of the things to consider. And one last thing, thank you for listening. I felt like there was a lot to cover, and we could probably still keep talking for another hour, but if Japan's of interest, here's some great insights on understanding Japanese consumers. And with that, I will pass the ball back over to Daniel.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. This was an excellent presentation. The information is timely and extremely relevant. We hope that the presentation provided our participants a solid foundational starting point, or tips at least, to further analyze their e-commerce channel mix. Let me just get to the slides, 1 second. Before we go to the Q&A session, I just wanted to emphasize, if you're not already working with the U.S. Commercial Service Office or would like to contact a local trade specialist who can help you with a digital strategy, this link below allows you to find an office by entering your zip code and view the contact details in that office. And one last note, I wanted to also briefly highlight 2 quick additional items. One, to help you with your digital strategy, the U.S. Commercial Service offers a website globalization review gap analysis service, which focuses on search engine optimization and internationalizing your business website. So I encourage you to contact your local office for additional information. And secondly, I know John touched upon this in Denver, our commercial service team can put you in contact with the U.S. Small Business Administration's State Trade Export Program, often referred to as STEP. The STEP program in your state can reimburse you eligible small business expenses up to a certain dollar value for export promotion activities. So we encourage you to explore your state's STEP program that can help support your international marketing activities. Now let's turn it to the Q&A session. I'm going to reach out to Bernadette. Bernadette, do we have any questions in the chat box?
Hi, Daniel. Yes, thank you. We've actually got a couple. And while we get those lined up, please feel free to enter your questions in the chat. So our first question was something that was a little bit earlier. It stated that, are there any known resources to have transparencies of duties and fees for business to consumers internationally by country? What do you think about that, John?
Yeah, so I think part of it depends, like, honestly, transparency of duties and fees. The way I've seen it mostly has been depends on what you're selling. So there are some resources. So if you're looking to the Japanese market, right, some of the resources would be to talk to a local shipping agent. So Yamato is based in, if you look up Yamato if you're interested in Japan, or also I think last week's speaker had some really great insight on that. And so I think maybe Tawny, who was from Zonos, she may be a good resource. But in terms of by country, I think I don't have one specific resource that I can recommend.
Okay, great. Another one is 75% of online buyers prefer sites that are in their own language. Does this skew differently for business-to-business customers?
I think it depends on the market you're going after, just in general. Like and also what kind of product, right? So for the most part, I would say it may skew a little bit differently, but it's in your best interest to offer content in the language of the market you're going after. So obviously, if you're going from here to another English-speaking location, it's kind of a different conversation. But if you're going to Japan, even for B2B, I would definitely recommend translating into the Japanese.
Okay, great. Another question is, I just started a dropship store with Ali Dropship. How can I go about making this store a success?
So not knowing what, not knowing the product or the target markets, like, you know, if you're talking about specifically for international, does that mean that you've already kind of addressed the domestic market? So being very clear about the value proposition of what you're offering in a new market. So dropship, you know, if you're doing dropship and you're shipping to someplace halfway across the world, be very clear about the time it's going to take. Be very clear about all the FAQs that you may get from consumers. So, you know, it's better to have more information in the local language so that you do build that trust and credibility with the end consumer. But I mean, there's lots of different ways to make the store a success. I think there's opportunities for interesting influencer collaborations potentially, you know, finding people in the target market that the people there trust, you know, and creating really good content, I think is key.
Okay, great, thank you. There was a question about what was the name of the website to review your website. It's called a Website Globalization Review, a Gap Analysis. So we oftenly refer to WGR, you know, the government. We love our acronyms. So a quick way is to contact your local trade specialist. And Dan, do you want to go ahead and put up the link again with all of the helpful resources, the slide?
Yes, here we go. Right there.
Yeah. So again, if you contact a local trade specialist using that link, we'll be able to help you find out more information on steps to do a website globalization review. Another question is, we're getting close to the top of the hour, is, let's see here. Customs and shipping is expensive. Any advice? And the second question to that is, do you recommend that the seller pays VAT, duties, and shipping?
I would highly recommend watching the previous webinar that covers that had actually a VAT expert who discussed how to recoup the costs associated with VAT and very different duties and shipping. I think part of it depends also on what you're shipping. So there's different rules, country by country rules, on how much you have to pay for customs, and if shipping's really expensive to drop ship, you may want to look into other options like FBA, where it's, you know, you're shipping in bulk to the country and having fulfillment done that way.
Okay, great. Let's see here. I think there was a last question of being that the QR code that will be included in the presentations that we'll send. So you'll be able to have access to scan that when we send that out. I believe that that's actually all of the questions that I see, but if I do scroll down and see that there is one that we missed, we'll be sure to email that over to John so that he can get that answered, or the appropriate department to answer for you. But I'd like to kick it back over to Dan to close us out.
Okay, thank you, Bernadette, and thank you, John, for the wonderful presentation. This concludes today's webinar, and thank you very much for joining us. Have a nice day and stay well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This now concludes today's call. All participants may disconnect at this time.